to talk about the Biden administration's response to rising inflation and supply chain issues.
Good morning. It's Tuesday, April 26th, 2022. The Senate convenes at 10 a.m. Eastern. The House will meet at 2 p.m. with votes scheduled for later this evening. And we're with you for the next 3 hours on the Washington Journal. We began on the news yesterday that Twitter's board accepted billionaire Elon Musk's offer to buy the social media company and take it private. If finalized, the move would put the world's richest man in charge of one of the most influential social networks. This morning, we're getting your reaction and asking if you think Elon Musk can improve Twitter. If you say yes, the number to call, 202-748-8000. If you say no, 202-748-8001. If you're unsure, 202-748-8002. You can also send us a text message, that number, 202-748-8003. If you do, please include your name and where you're from. Otherwise, on Twitter, it's at C-SPAN-WJ. On Facebook, it's facebook.com/C-SPAN. And a very good Tuesday morning to you. You can go ahead and start calling in now on this question. Do you think Elon Musk will improve Twitter? Here's how the Wall Street Journal put that buyout, that takeover yesterday. The $44 billion deal marks the close of a dramatic courtship and a change of heart at Twitter, where many executives and board members initially opposed Mr. Musk's takeover approach. The deal has polarized Twitter employees, they write, users and regulators as well, over the tech giant's power to wield in determining the parameter.
Now to road safety, as we reported last.
And how those companies enforce their rules. That from the front page of the Wall Street Journal today. Elon Musk posting this statement to his Twitter page about buying and taking over Twitter. Free speech is the bedrock of a functioning democracy, he said, and Twitter is the digital town square where matters vital to the future of humanity are debated. I also want to make Twitter better than ever by enhancing the product with new features, making the algorithms open source to increase trust, defeating the spam bots, and authenticating all humans. He writes, Twitter has tremendous potential. I look forward to working with the company and the community of users to unlock that potential. Elon Musk yesterday. More reaction, and we'll take you through reaction from Capitol Hill to the White House. But this from the White House briefing room. This was Jen Psaki asked about Elon Musk taking over Twitter yesterday.
What I can tell you as a general matter, no matter who owns or runs Twitter, the president has long been concerned about the power of large social media platforms, the power they have over our everyday lives, has long argued that tech platforms must be held accountable for the harms they cause. He has been a strong supporter of fundamental reforms to achieve that goal, including reforms to Section 230, enacting antitrust reforms, requiring more transparency, and more. And he's encouraged that there's bipartisan interest in Congress. In terms of what hypothetical policies might happen, I'm just not going to speak to that at this point in time.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki yesterday from the briefing room. A day for tweets, and we'll be looking for yours throughout this first segment, throughout the show as always. But this from Elon Musk yesterday on the news. He tweeted that I hope even my worst critics remain on Twitter because that is what free speech means. To members of Congress tweeting about Elon Musk taking over Twitter, this is Senator Marsha Blackburn, the Republican from Tennessee. Elon Musk buying Twitter terrifies the left because they don't want their power to censor conservatives threatened. Ken Buck, the Republican from Colorado, saying if Elon Musk acquires Twitter, how many on the left will actually follow through with their threat to leave the platform? Probably the same amount that left our country when Trump won the presidency. This from Senator Elizabeth Warren from Massachusetts, saying this deal is dangerous for our democracy. Billionaires like Elon Musk play by a different set of rules than everyone else, accumulating power for their own gain. We need a wealth tax and strong rules to hold big tech accountable. And this, Congressman Dean Phillips from Minnesota, the Democrat, saying Elon Musk is paying over $100 for each of our 400 million accounts. Freedom of speech has no cost, but freedom of reach is quite expensive. Just a few of the comments from members of Congress. We'll show you more, but we mostly want to hear from you this morning. Again, it's 202-748-8000. If you say yes, you think Elon Musk will improve Twitter, it's 202-748-8001. If you say no, if you're unsure, a line for you as well, 202-748-8002 is that number. Anne is up first out of Jamaica, New York. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Okay. I think this is a very dangerous thing for democracy. I don't think no rich man should have the privilege to do this. Our country is, democracy is about to go anyway. I happen to be an 80-something-year-old woman, and I think this is a dangerous game because the far right, they love this, but this is just dangerous. And there should never be any one human being be able to do this.
And how much do you use Twitter? And how concerned?
I don't use Twitter at all, but I do hear Twitter, and I just think that it's dangerous, like I said, for a rich man like this man, the richest man in the world, to have this much power. It is going to be very, very dangerous. Democracy in this country is almost gone anyway, so I think this is almost the end of democracy.
And speaking of a rich man having power and influence, Jeff Bezos took over the Washington Post. Were you concerned about him having too much power when he bought the Washington Post?
Yes. And I think these rich, powerful men, why don't they take this money and do something for human mankind? The human mankind, there are people out here suffering. Do something for them instead of putting all this money into this. They are horrible human beings. Horrible human beings. I would never want nothing. I'm not a rich human being. I work all my life, but I would never think that they are nothing to me. They are just some horrible human beings.
That's Ann out of Jamaica, New York. This is Jay in Wake Forest, North Carolina. Good morning. You're next.
Yeah, good morning. I don't think there really is no improving Twitter anymore or anything online or anything in the media, period. I mean, unless Elon Musk comes out and shows us exactly how Twitter, Facebook, C-SPAN, CNN, BSDNC, ABC, CBS, unless they come out and he shows us the algorithms of how y'all helped Joe Biden rig the election, then I don't know what good it's going to do. Whoever buys it. Trump's not going to go back, so what does it matter? That's my question to you. What does it matter?
Elon Musk talking about making Twitter an open source platform, planning to take Twitter private and turning the company into a bulwark of free speech. This from the Wall Street Journal, write up about it. He's already said he thinks Twitter should open source its algorithms, meaning that others outside the company would be able to view and recommend fixes and changes to that algorithm. Just one of the changes that he has talked about. Asking you this morning your thoughts on Elon Musk taking over Twitter. Do you think he'll improve the platform? As we said, a day for Twitter. So here's just a few of your comments so far from Twitter. This from the Libertonian. Conservatives repeatedly scream about being censored on this website, Twitter, but as far as I can tell, they're not, since there are thousands of conservatives calling random people groomers and pedophiles with no consequences. It's only when they break explicit things when they're censored, said the Libertonian. BC Venice said, I don't expect Twitter to change that much. This is about power and control as the deep state adds another social outlet to its portfolio. Jim at Lake Gaston saying the straw that broke Twitter's back was the cancellation of the Babylon Bees account. I'll be glad to see them back. He said they were always poignant. Just a few of your comments, some of the conversation happening on Twitter. It's at C-SPAN WJ if you want to join that conversation, or you can call like John did out of Salem, Illinois. Good morning. What are your thoughts, John?
Yeah, I don't think the problem's necessarily social media. I think it's the law that we have now on defamation, this New York Times standard that essentially means that you cannot defame a celebrity or someone who's a quote-unquote a public person or public personality. I think that there's some rumblings in the Supreme Court that could be on its last legs, but the notion that you have to prove that someone has defamed you with knowledge that the statement is false or deliberately indifferent to its truth or falsity is the problem to me, because I don't think we'd have QAnon or Pizzagate if we just had normal common law rules on defamation. It's nearly impossible to sue somebody if you're like Hillary Clinton or Tom Hanks, who has been defamed for the last 20 years, because it's impossible to prove that the person who has defamed you knew they were falsely accusing you of something. I mean, obviously, Hillary Clinton didn't have a child trafficking organization in the basement of a pizza place, but she couldn't sue these folks. So to me, it's just like the law on libel needs to go back to what it was, I don't know, 50 years ago, to where you could, a public figure could sue without and actually win damages.
That's John out of Illinois. This is Bill out of Medfield, Mass. Good morning. You're next.
Yeah, hi. How you doing? Yeah, I don't think there's going to be any improvement on Twitter because all the rest of the media in the United States, and I'm not sure about the rest of the world, but it seems like almost every other media outlet in the world now is all for the globalists and the Democrats, and there's like the one point of view, like C-SPAN now. C-SPAN used to be where it took both sides, but C-SPAN is definitely, it leans in the Democratic side, and you're supposed to be fair and even, but everything that, whenever callers call up, Democrats get to talk twice as long. If somebody says something about where the election was stolen, it was okay when Hillary Clinton said that Trump stole the election, but it wasn't okay when Trump said that Biden stole the election. In other words, it leans one way, and in order for America to be great again, we got to have 2 points of view, not just one. Otherwise, the world is gone, because as goes America, goes the world. So smarten up, C-SPAN. Bye-bye.
It's Bill in Massachusetts. This is Todd in Upper Marlboro, Maryland. Good morning.
How are you all doing? Thank you so much for accepting my call.
Go ahead, Todd.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much for accepting my call. I really appreciate it. I actually, I'm a little on the edge about Mr. Musk, only due to the fact that some of his actions, I believe, seem to be aware of history and past.
She conceded within 12 hours of Trump winning?
In our, work environments, like unions and things, how they work and how they worked in the past. And I haven't really seen the actions on his side to show how he might improve things like unions or just privatize companies in general. So I'm excited to see.
I believe it.
Take the company. But I
Good morning. How's it going?
With
the answer is yes.
Don't work like he works.
Is that a question? Because it is a yes.
I think a lot of the concerns that other callers have are true when it comes to free speech.
Good morning. Hope you're doing well. That's an interesting thing. I might have to look that. I might look into that. Not that it matters a whole lot because it's from like 5 years ago, but it's a cool thing to know.
But really see
a little talking point. We're doing. We're watching a little bit of C-SPAN because C-SPAN decided to cover Elon Musk and Twitter today, so that was an easy dunk for me. And then after, let's see, what time is it? I'm waiting until about 7 o'clock, and then I'm gonna start the Pennsylvania Senate debate that happened, I think, last night with Dr. Oz and the rest of the people, or the rest of the Republicans applying for Senate. It was a really interesting. It's an interesting turnout. There was it's kind of interesting. There's Dr. Oz. There's a couple other people, and then there's like the former, like, I don't even remember. It's like the former UN representative for Scotland or Dutchland or something. She like points it out a lot. The guy answering the phone looks like he was born in Area 56. Dude, who's Dr. Oz? I hear his name a lot. Dr. Oz is like this famous, he's like this famous doctor TV show host. He has this show called Dr. Oz. And like, it's really interesting that he is running for he's running for the Republican Senate, or he's running as a Republican for the Senate in Pennsylvania for 2022. Yeah, this is the guy. Let's see. Yeah, he has like he's on a lot of magazines. He's all over the place. He's like a celebrity icon. He is a doctor. This is correct, but it never really feels that way. But the reason he's such an interesting pick, he was endorsed by Trump, but he's like, as far as Turkey is concerned, or not as Turkey, as far as the Republicans are concerned, this is an American Turkish man who served in the Turkish military, not the American military. He is an active practicing Muslim, and I'm a liberal. I'm cool with all of that, but like, for a Republican to see that, like the America First Judeo-Christian Republican, and also there's like videos of him dancing with Michelle Obama. There's like I don't know. Never mind. I don't know about the Oprah one, but yeah, there's clearly a lot of he's clearly indulged in the liberal celebrity scope for a while, and now he's like just carpet bagging his way. He's from New Jersey. He moves over to Pennsylvania, and then now he's like living less than a year. Is like, hey, I'm running for Senate. He Botoxes his forehead. I believe it 100%. You look at that forehead. That is some that's some work for sure. He got some work done. Yeah, so it's an interesting, and he gets a lot of shit. Like, a lot of people rip on him throughout the debate, but weirdly enough, they get an easy pass, and we'll get more into that later about how the easy pass goes. But yeah, we'll finish with God, I can't remember his name. It's like John or something like that. He's a cool guy, but yeah, he's definitely got the brainiac. He's got the mega mind. He's got the mega mind going on. Say hello, kitty. Hello, kitty. Hi. Morning, kitty.
Hey.
Yeah, I'm just giving myself a little bit of time to kind of finish some breakfast, and then I'll do a little more reacting to the Dr. Oz debate.
Hold true to transparency, as he
It's a good time, even if you're. It's just always fun to
things on Twitter.
I think it's always fun to just look at the other side and see what they're arguing about, especially with each other, because there wasn't a single Democrat on the debate floor that night, so all it was Republican versus Republican versus Republican, and it's really interesting to see how they attack each other.
We'll see that there is still hope.
Gives you a good ammo box.
Not in the sense of partisanship, and not in the sense of ignorantly calling bipartisanship, partisanship. I think he might have a shot. He definitely might have a shot.
That's Todd in Upper Marlboro, Maryland. If you think Elon Musk will improve Twitter as he takes it over, 202-748-8000 is the number.
Thank you, Todd.
If you think he will not, 202-748-8001. If you're unsure, 202-748-8002. Plenty of op-eds in today's national papers on this front. Megan McArdle writing for the Washington Post.
Oh, she saw something interesting. My brother was playing with something interesting.
Alter by executive order and thereby immediately improve the public discourse. He could rejigger the algorithms to show us tweets in simple reverse chronological order rather than promoting the tweets most likely to, quote, engage us, which would make users less likely to encounter the latest highly engaging outrage. He could de-emphasize advertising, which would lessen advertiser pressure to ban offensive speech. He could axe the retweeting function that promote the formation of cancellation mobs. All those things would make a big difference, she writes, but they would also probably make Twitter a less viable business, costing him a bunch of money. And probably
I don't see why he would do that at all.
Thing that Musk's fans
this is the thing we all got to remember. I feel like this is half the reason Elon Musk is buying Twitter. Elon Musk in the past 2 years has been capable of some of the largest pump and dumps I've ever seen in my life that have been legal. And he does it just by a tweet. just say some shit on Twitter, and then everyone's like, "Oh my God, Doge to the moon!" And you're just feeling, you're just feeding on it. So Elon is a hype guy. This is just him controlling the hype.
Even Musk himself are imagining he can jettison its moderation policies. She writes, there will always be gray zones because no one, not even Elon Musk, wants a truly unmoderated space where child porn and spam tweets jostle with libel and copyright infringement for our attention, crowding out the interesting discussion that we'd like to have. Megan McArdle writing for the Washington Post today. This is Cindy in Miami, Florida. Good morning. You're next.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I don't agree. I really don't agree. I don't think. I think this is becoming really politic. I just heard a gentleman, with all due respect, saying that C-SPAN is moving more to Democrats. Why even say that? This is talking about Twitter. My only concern is that if this gentleman takes over a Twitter, then he's opening the platform to back to the whole thing that originally banned all those politicians and all those criminals. We don't want to say that Mr.
It was already open to that. This doesn't change that.
We don't want to say that he's a criminal, or we don't want to insult him. But the reality is, he has turned this entire world upside down. That's all I have to say. He has turned this world all upside down, and I don't agree. And I think Elon Musk should go into something else. Go entertain yourself with something else, and leave Twitter alone the way it is. That's all I have to say.
Joseph, here in Washington, D.C. Good morning. You're next.
Hi, good morning. I will say that Twitter, in a way, has become one of the last few social media platforms that does promote free speech and freedom of expression. I mean, after Facebook and Tumblr and Instagram really ramped up their policies in terms of suppressing queer voices, suppressing the voices of people of color, I think that Twitter, in its form as of yesterday, was one of the few places where you could go and really, see some hot takes, as it were, right? And see some things, see some opinions that you didn't necessarily agree with, and engage with those. So I do think that Elon Musk, with all of his vast fortune, and I don't know that he necessarily is motivated by money actually in this situation. I think that, if you go back and look and see why he even wanted to buy Twitter in the first place, it almost seemed like a whim of his. Just something that, like, a little passion project that he thought that he could maybe, do something with. I do hope that he improves it by removing a lot of the advertising, or at least minimizing it, so that people are actually engaging with each other and not engaging with corporations and having our information sold, into the big data cloud or whatever you want to call it. So I do think he has the potential to improve it in that sense, and I do hope that he keeps it one of the last few major, large.
I like people imagining the big data cloud as an actual cloud.
Social media platforms that does actually promote free speech.
CNBC taking on the unanswered questions about this Twitter takeover. One of those questions, how much control will Musk exert? This is what they write. Twitter has said that the company is being acquired by an entity wholly owned by Elon Musk. That says nothing about how much control the mega billionaire will exert. They write, Musk, currently CEO of Tesla, which has a market cap of $1 trillion, and SpaceX, which is valued in the private market at $100 billion. He's also got his startups, Neuralink, and the Boring Company, a tunneling company. They ask, will he take the Jeff Bezos?
I forgot about his tunneling company.
Management team to run the operation, or will he be a hands-on owner? The answer will go a long way to knowing what to expect from content moderation and whether the many high-profile people who have been kicked off the site will soon return. Bob in Cookeville, Tennessee. Good morning. You're next.
Good morning. How are you? Thank you for taking my call. I don't think he can do any worse. I was banned from Twitter in July 2020 before the election just for posting that.
Oh God!
I didn't think Joe Biden was mad.
I have a feeling that people think that since Elon Musk bought Twitter, that they're going to get unbanned from it, and I doubt it.
Capable of being president.
Highly doubt it.
Banned me the next day. And as far as that guy called in a while ago talking about C-SPAN being biased. I've been watching this show for decades, and I've seen you people hang up on Republicans and say, "Oh, well, we lost Jim from Missouri. Let's go to a Democrat." And one other thing. One other question. How many times did y'all cover the Hunter Biden laptop before the election? Or have any guest on there that even talked about it? Thank you for taking my call.
It's Bob in Cookeville, Tennessee. This is Brenda.
Oh, that's so funny.
Grass, Georgia. Good morning. You're next. Brenda, you with us this morning?
Oh, well, yes, I think he's going to do good, and I think he's going to make it better. But I want to know how come they took OAN off of TV. I hope he buys that TV out. I really got to. They could get mad at me if they want to, but this is my free speech and everything.
I'm so confused.
Cousins attack them news people out and everything, and they don't say nothing to him about it.
I'm so confused.
Brenda, what makes you trust Elon Musk? You think he's going to make it better, and you hope he buys other...
He's like, I'm just going to go back to the first thing that I remember you actually being able to say.
I believe the man's. I believe he's trusty. He is. He really is trusty.
He's trusty.
That's Brenda in Georgia. A couple callers have brought up Donald Trump already this morning. This from Twitter, Jersey Girl.
So yeah, a couple scattered opinions here and there on the topic. We might get more into it later. We're going to move over to the debate. Le débat. And if we get a little extra time, we might even do the, I don't know, go through the Le Pen and Macron debate, but fucking in France. But they kind of already, had that election. Le Pen lost, Macron won. So maybe we don't have to. But this video is something else. This is a good time.
Pennsylvania.
This is a good time.
This is the Pennsylvania Republican primary U.S. Senate debate.
Well, good evening, welcome, and thanks so much for joining us tonight. I'm Dennis Owens with ABC 27 News in Harrisburg.
And I'm Lisa Sylvester with WPXI Channel 11 News in Pittsburgh. We are broadcasting and streaming live across every county in the Commonwealth.
The 4 Republican candidates standing on the stage tonight have met our eligibility criteria, each hoping to become the next senator from Pennsylvania.
So here are the rules for tonight's debate. Each candidate will get 60 seconds to answer a question. The candidate will get 30 seconds to answer if there's a follow-up or rebuttal. And if a clarification is needed, they will have 15 seconds. And we will remind the candidates throughout the night of those times.
I gotta figure out my name thing. It just doesn't show all the time.
You are watching tonight's debate from one of our Nexstar media stations across the state and our partner station in Pittsburgh, WPXI TV.
All right, we want to get right to what people want to know.
Pennsylvania is such a small
How did
state.
each of you end up running for a U.S. Senate seat in Pennsylvania? According to our Nexstar Emerson College The Hill poll, more than 70% of Republican voters said the amount of time a candidate has lived in Pennsylvania is important. We begin with Mr. McCormick. You've been campaigning on your Pennsylvania roots, but you have not actually lived in Pennsylvania for the last 15 years. So explain why it seems that you returned to the Commonwealth just in time to run for the U.S. Senate. Mr. McCormick, you have 60 seconds.
Elon, Twitter daddy. What's up? Yup, Elon is our Twitter daddy. Give him praise. We are currently... good morning to you, Justin. We're currently going over the Pennsylvania senator debate featuring the one and only Dr. Oz. Dr. Oz, if you haven't been with it lately, he is currently running for senator of Pennsylvania. He's lived in New Jersey, ran a show out of New Jersey, picked up everything and moved to Pennsylvania, and now he's endorsed by Trump and running for a Republican Senate, which is quite interesting because when you look at because he is polling terribly in the Republican constituency. The Republicans want an American first Judeo-Christian type of senator and energy independent senator. Our politics having celebrities. Yeah, that's kind of what the future's becoming. Like Trump's just endorsing a bunch of these people. I guess money talks because like Dr. Oz is probably the furthest thing from a conservative than I've ever seen. He's definitely closer to a liberal than he is a conservative. Just from like the conservative base alone. Mind you, I'm okay with this. Like, if he ran as a Democrat, I'd be like, woohoo. But, like, he is a Turkish American who served the Turkish military and did not serve the American military. So he is not America first in their eyes. He is a practicing Muslim. Again, that's, you know, not a Judeo-Christian value that any conservative constituent would want to uphold, let alone vote for. And he's been seen dancing with Michelle Obama and has been featured with many other liberal celebrities in the past and has a very robust background in the liberal celebrity space. So, like, he's not doing too well, but at the same time, he's one of the more well-funded candidates in the running. This dude is another carpetbagger. I can't remember his name, but he's another guy who he lived in Pennsylvania, and he runs businesses in Pennsylvania from, like, Colorado. And he's just moved back so that he can run for Senate.
I grew up in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania, where we had a family farm, and I spent the first 18 years of my life
Dave McCormick.
hunting and fishing and playing sports. And then I went to West Point. And so I left for my first tour of duty to West Point, the Army.
He was probably the least substantial candidate.
Second Airborne Division. Then I came back to Pennsylvania.
He's probably the least substantial candidate in the whole running, although he is well funded.
600 jobs. And throughout that time, throughout my entire life, we've had the family farm for 45 years, and I've been the owner of that family farm for the last 10 years. So my Pennsylvania roots are deep. I'm very connected.
Yeah, we're going to bust
my
through this,
friends,
and then we'll go
where
back
I
to
grew
Twitter
up,
stuff.
And I'm very connected to the people of Pennsylvania, and it'd be a great honor and a privilege to be able to represent them in the Senate.
All right, thank you, Mr. McCormick. Turning to you, Mr. Oz. Except for your time attending
Mr.
medical school and
Mehmet
graduate
Oz.
school, you have not actually lived in the Commonwealth in Pennsylvania. So how do you respond to concerns?
Look at all that
you do not
Botox,
know
man.
What is best for Pennsylvanians?
It's in his dang forehead.
Well, Pennsylvanians that I speak to are quite clear. They care much more about what I stand for than where I'm from. But I did grow up less than 10 miles from Kennett Square, where my father learned a lot about mushrooms. He was an immigrant, recruited to this country as a doctor, and he would always tell me, don't be a mushroom when you grow up. And to make sure I did not sit in the dark all day long, get fed manure, and then get canned at the end of it all, I went to medical school at Penn, business school at Wharton, and then the biggest and most important decision of my life, I met and married my wife, Lisa. We actually live in the house we were married in.
All right, thank you, Mr. Oz. Ms.
How are you a Pennsylvanian? What draws your roots to Pennsylvania, Mr. Oz? Well, I married my wife in the house that we live in.
You have lived in Pennsylvania.
Yay.
You are quite young. And we know that Pennsylvania voters value their deep roots here, but
My dad said,
higher.
don't be
What
a
do you
mushroom.
think you have to do
And here I
in order to
am.
Improve your poll numbers. You have 60 seconds.
Actually, in the last poll,
This
in the
lady
Stalker
is-
poll, I am essentially at
I don't expect Kathy Burnett to win, but this lady is dangerous. She would be, I think she'd be a pretty responsible senator.
At a
But
three-way
this is just for the nomination for the Republicans. They still have to go up against the Democrat nominee and vote in later. Right now, the Republicans at least are believing that's going to be John Fetterman, who is like the mayor of a town in Pennsylvania.
place.
At least
And
was.
that is as a direct result of the people here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, keep an
because
eye on the
they
ladies
want
in this
their own-
debate. They go
You know, I don't
so
think they
fucking hard on each other, which is just ridiculous to me. Like, go after the one with the most money. Go after the one who's leading in the polls.
Never see them again.
Hi,
And
Katie.
if they should win, you will never see them again. And I think we've gone through two of the worst years of our lives during the pandemic and on. And I believe people are very concerned about making sure that our voices are represented. They want someone who doesn't just parachute into our state because it's an opportune time for them to do so. And
She's
then
calling out the
say,
carpetbaggers.
if they should win, then they leave and we have no voice. This seat is too important.
Calling out the
to
carpetbaggers.
just throw away our voice like
Oh, that's great.
Thank you very much, Ms. Barnett.
We
thank
got-
you, Mr. Bardos. In that
well,
Trafalgar poll
I think
that,
there's
Ms.
3
Barnett referenced,
carpetbaggers
you are
on
running in the
stage.
back of the pack of the 5 candidates
He is
on
not.
stage tonight. You recently expressed some frustration that you've been.
This guy's the furthest back, and this guy's the guy I want to be the senator. At least if we were gonna have to pick a Republican, like if it was like this is the guy I would want.
Other
He is
opponent, your political
he makes
opponent
some
in the
reasonable
side of the race,
suggestions.
Mr. Bartos,
He
how
kind
do
of
you
keeps away
explain
from
why
the
you are
cultural
trailing in the polls?
politics.
You have 60 seconds.
Well, I'm a lifelong Pennsylvanian, proudly raised in Berks County, married a Pennsylvania girl, grew up in Allentown. We've raised our 2 girls in the state. And I think there's a key difference. The reason 40% of the Republican electorate right now remains undecided is because they're trying to figure out, who do they trust? Who do they trust to actually do what they say they're going to do? And you're going to hear this a lot tonight. There's a lot of words from a lot of the candidates. I am the only candidate running who has a proven track record of actually getting things done for the people of Pennsylvania. When the Democrats shut us down, when Tom Wolf and John Fetterman shut us down the last 2 years, I rolled up my sleeves, I gathered a great group of leaders, we raised $3.5 million and helped over 1,000 women and men across all 67 counties keep the lights on. In
John Fetterman is low-key a badass. I would love to have him as a senator for Pennsylvania.
I will always fight for them because I always have. I always will because I always have. That's the key differentiator in this race. A lot of words from the other candidates. I'm a doer. I'm a fighter. I'm going to win this race because Pennsylvanians know they trust me to go down
it's like why does a dude from Nebraska / Colorado care about stuff in Pennsylvania? 1, Dr. Oz. That's why I care. 2, it's the midterms. So like this is all going to determine like how effective the current administration is going to be in the next 2 years. Because if if we lose some seats, if the Dems lose some seats, they'll get even less done. We got to get, right now, the goal is to get out of the gridlock.
Away from where you're standing right now, but you spent most of your time outside of the Commonwealth. So same question, why does it appear that you perhaps are not connecting with Pennsylvania voters? 60 seconds to respond.
Well, I am connecting with Pennsylvania voters. I am an 8th generation Pennsylvanian, so my family's been in Pennsylvania longer than anyone else in this race. And as a matter of fact, my first real job was at Hershey Park. And I live close to my elderly parents.
Hershey Park.
My sister and brother. There's only one person on this stage that has spent more time in Pennsylvania than me, and that's Jeff, because I've spent about half my life here. I worked as a 3rd generation doctor of chiropractic with my father in Camp Hill. And then I went to Denmark and served as the U.S. ambassador to Denmark, Greenland, and the Faroe Islands. So I voted and paid taxes in Pennsylvania even when I was serving abroad, on behalf of all Pennsylvanians and all Americans as well, working to counter Russia and China with the Department of Defense and NATO, working to increase jobs here at home, because I actually increased our trade with my great team over 43% while I was there. So there's no one else in this race who's more Pennsylvanian than I am.
She ought to just started with that. Like, hey, what you haven't really been up in Pennsylvania lately. What makes you feel like the Pennsylvanians can connect to you? Oh yeah, dude, while I was in Denmark serving our country, keeping it America first, by the way, I kept voting in Pennsylvania. I kept paying taxes in Pennsylvania. I care about this place. Like, that should have been the start, not this whole like, oh yeah, I worked with my dad as a chiropractor, and who cares? Who cares?
All right, thank you, Ms. Sands. Dennis.
Well, we've all seen them, therefore we can't ignore them. We need to follow up here about the
Dennis.
attack ads that have been flooding TVs,
The
phones,
attack
and
ads.
mailboxes across Pennsylvania. An unprecedented amount of money, tens of millions of dollars so far, has been spent, much of it on negative advertising directed at Mr. McCormick and Mr. Oz. Mr. Oz, we're going to start this question with you. I don't know if you've heard, sir, but you've been called a Hollywood liberal and a rhino, Republican in name only. What do you say to the critics who are saying that? You have 30 seconds.
Probably the truest
These
thing.
are ads primarily run by one of my opponents.
It's like
Mr. McCormick.
It's like what I would like to see is like his voting record. You know, if that's an even possible thing. It's like, who did you vote for in 2020? Who did you vote for in 2016? Who did you vote for in 2012? Like, that would be really interesting to see. And to see if it was like Obama, like I just want to see his votes. Like,
And they are designed to try to fool the
that would be like a real kicker. Is like, how long have you been practicing what you preach?
Information was unable to pull the wool over his eyes. President Trump saw right through him. He therefore did not endorse Mr. McCormick. He endorsed me. And out of that, and another slew of these ads has arisen, once again trying to tell Pennsylvanians something that President Trump does not believe is true, and I can state categorically is not true.
Okay, Mr. McCormick, an attack ad claims that you made billions of dollars for China and millions for yourself as a hedge fund manager. In 30 seconds, what is your response to that criticism?
Listen, I've been a successful businessman. I've run 2 businesses. I served in our military for 10 years fighting against the communists. I negotiated at the highest levels against the Chinese and other countries when I had a top secret clearance at the National Security Council. And I've done business around the world in 20 countries, including 2% of our business in China. And it's just disingenuous for Mehmet to say that when Mehmet has so many dollars coming in his pocket from China, which we can talk about, that it's sort of mind-boggling. And we can talk more about the negative ads, because the negative ads in my case.
Okay, Mr. Oz, I want to flip back to you really quickly. You've also been accused of flip-flopping on key conservative issues like abortion since you've been running for Senate. You've said you support overturning Roe versus Wade. Should there be exceptions for rape, incest, or the life of the mother? 30 seconds.
President Trump endorsed being quite clearly in the first point he made.
This is all he has. Like, this is something that you should notice since we're.
And I am
what the heck?
I've been very.
All right, yeah, something to pay attention to through the rest of the debate. Anytime he has anything to say, it's about how Trump endorsed him. Like, it all starts with Daddy Trump endorsed me. It's so weird.
Clear on my position throughout this race. There isn't, to my knowledge, evidence that I'm not pro-life. In fact, in crowded groups, I've been always out there saying that I'm pro-life, even if everyone else in the group is pro-choice. And I've been able to proudly proclaim as a heart surgeon who's taking care of little babies,
it's not
5 days old.
I mean, it's not hard for a doctor to, like, I feel like generally most doctors are like only pro-choice because they feel like, or because they like, it's like if it was left to their, like, they're pro-choice because it's utilitarian, because of the utility. It's yeah, it's like morally, ethically correct, I guess. But like if you're gonna bring it down to like moral decisions of on the personal level, like I think a lot of doctors are actually pro-life. They just respect the choice. It's not that they are, not that they appreciate it. That, and that, like, that's only coming from personal, like, my personal, personal assumptions, because my mom is a pro-life person who acknowledges and respects the choice that other people have to, like, she's a doctor, she's a pro-life doctor, but she's also respecting choice. She respects choice, in that she is not trying to actively, she does not support it, making abortions actively illegal and shit like that.
I met one recently, actually, that has now grown up to become a teenager. But saving those children's lives when they're that young is reflective of how small they are in the womb.
Should there be an exception?
There should be an exception for the life of the mother. We don't want mothers dying as they try to give birth to a child.
Mr. McCormick, also with you, if Roe versus Wade is overturned, should there be exceptions for rape, incest, or the life of the mother? And we will hear from everybody on this. You have 30 seconds, sir.
Well, I want to say Mehmet has flip-flopped on every major issue. And you can go to his own comments. May 21st, 2019, an interview at the Breakfast Club. He essentially said that he was worried about
McCormick is, this is an interesting thing. McCormick is only interested in Dr. Oz. None of the people on this stage are relevant to McCormick. All the ammo he has packed for this debate is directed toward Dr. Oz. It's all attacks on him. And it's really interesting because Dr. Oz has this he almost has this force field of endorsement by Trump. Nothing is getting in. Nothing is getting in.
Putting in place pro-life legislation, and he called into question when life begins.
Yeah, McCormick can hardly talk about himself. All he can do is talk about Dr. Oz.
And he's flip-flopped on every single one of them.
How about you? Exceptions in your view?
Yeah, I believe in the very rare instances there should be exceptions for life of the mother.
Okay, I want to move to Ms. Barnett. You have 30 seconds. You have spoken passionately about the issue of abortion while on the campaign trail. You're very much pro-life. Should there be any exceptions in your view? You have 30 seconds.
Yeah, well, actually, I actually should get a minute because you've asked them 2 questions and you're just now getting to me. But a high name ID, which is really one of the only reasons why Mehmet Oz received that endorsement, works both ways. His name ID is so high that people know he's not a conservative. Hence the reason why I'm the only one in that last poll who shot up and got the benefit out of that particular endorsement. MAGA does not belong to President Trump. MAGA, although he coined the word, MAGA is actually, it belongs to the people. Our values never shifted to President Trump's values. It was President Trump who shifted and aligned with our values.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bartos, you too are pro-life. Should there be exceptions, or do you support an entire ban of abortion? 30 seconds.
Well, wait, before we get to that, your viewers at home should play a drinking game every time these candidates talk about themselves, because this election has to be about the voters. It has to be about you, the voters, not about us. They've made this about themselves. They've spent $60 million fighting with each other. And people pat themselves on the back.
I found the cutest little Elden Ring picture.
This election is about fighting for the people of Pennsylvania, making Pennsylvania what she can be.
Wait, what is
we can't
this?
have this. We have to beat the Democrats in November. That's why.
Banjo-Kazooie?
Where have these guys been for the last 7-10 years fighting for conservative principles?
Let me
around
just ask you,
Pennsylvania?
though, quickly, should there be exceptions when it comes to abortion?
Yes, I believe in exceptions.
Okay, let's turn to Ms. Sands. You're also
That's
proudly
so cool.
pro-life. Should there be exceptions, or should abortion be banned across the board? You have 30 seconds.
I am pro-life at the beginning of life and at the end of life. But I do want to comment on two of my opponents. Oz says he's pro-life, but as a matter of fact, he's not just not pro-life, and we've just tweeted out his own words that he is not pro-life, but also he's Turkey first. He served in the Turkish military, not the U.S. military. And he chose to do that. He chose to put Turkey first, and he has said that the baby's heartbeat is not a heartbeat, it's an electrical impulse. We know that's what a heartbeat is. And Dave McCormick, he is China first.
Okay.
He made his fortune in China, and he is China first.
Ms. Sands, thank you very much. I do want to give Mr. Oz a moment, 15 seconds to respond.
President Trump was very clear. I'm America first. I was obliged to serve for 2 months
Maybe he
in the
didn't know.
infirmary.
Yep,
in
started with President Trump again.
Which I did in order to be able to visit my parents as I went through my life. I can love my mother, and I can love my country as well.
Thank you. Lisa.
All right, moving on.
Pretty good
We're talking
rebuttal
about
for
the
that,
economy and
'cause I
American
think you-
jobs. First
I think you're
question to Ms.
required
Barnett. The pandemic
to serve in the
exposed
Turkish.
weaknesses in
Well, I don't know what the
contribute
situation is.
to inflation and product shortages, outsourcing. Some companies have said that this is
But yeah, some countries like Israel require you to like serve if you're gonna have Israeli citizenship or something like that.
We have seen firsthand how this can be risky in a crisis. Ms. Barnett, how would you bring back high-paying American jobs and address the supply chain shortages? Please
Yeah.
be specific. 60 seconds.
Yes, much of what we are experiencing, if not almost all of it, is as a direct result of the failed policies of the Democrat Party. But here's the rub. Democrats can change absolutely everything tomorrow if they wanted to. They would just have to admit that every single thing they've ever done and said has been a complete and utter failure. And what are the odds of them doing that? So when you're looking at what they've done, it's not COVID that stopped the supply chain. The reason why the supply chain is the way it is right now, we have 20% of the 9,000 shipping containers sitting outside of ports, and instead of Pete Buttigieg doing what was necessary in order to get the goods and services off those ships and onto the shelves and grocery stores, he went and took maternity leave instead of being able to drill and dig and put the resources, the energy resources, into being able to drill and get it out to not just Americans but also to the rest of the world. Democrats have decided to weaponize climate change and to create a war against energy. So
All right, thank you.
Democrats can change it.
What a weird tweet.
All right, turning to you, Mr. Bartos, how would you?
Someone's like, Elon Musk just gave $44 billion to the former owners of Twitter, and they can now use to end world hunger. Or no, that they can now use to end hunger, disease, poverty, war, and injustice. What will they do first? Well, like, the answer is nothing.
America. How would you also address the supply chain shortages?
Such a weird,
Please
I don't
be
know.
Specific 60 seconds.
Sure, I'm running to save.
Watch them actively do something that is a net benefit from all the money they made off of that.
The number one way to do it is to unleash Pennsylvania's energy.
Be like, the former owners of Twitter planted 1 billion trees in Africa with all the money they earned.
And we can power our allies around the world with Pennsylvania resources. And natural gas is a much cleaner alternative to the coal plants that are being fired up all around the world. These greenies in Europe and around the country, they're making coal happen. Pennsylvania is not only the key to keeping Vladimir Putin in check and holding him in check and stopping his war of aggression, but it is the key to bringing good paying working family jobs back here to Pennsylvania. Now, I'm running to save Main Street, Pennsylvania. The two out-of-staters, the two tourists who've moved here to run, they don't know Main Street, Pennsylvania. They haven't cared to spend time there until they decided to run for office. You can't save Main Street, Pennsylvania if you cannot find Main Street, Pennsylvania. From day one, my campaign has been focused on all of you, your families, and what's best for this place I've lived in my whole life and live with every fiber of my being. As a United States Senator,
This is the
I'll be
proper
on
MO
fighting
for the guy who's in 5th place. This is proper tactics for the guy who's in 5th place. You're running, like, the people who are polling the highest, these two, are battling each other. These two should be attacking these two, but instead they'll go and attack each other through the rest of the debate. And then this guy, he's like, screw all these people. I want to talk to you. I want to talk to the people. Let's talk about the people's issues, because he has nothing left. He has no, like, no one's attacking him. No one's,
just getting our gas to market.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bartos. Turning to you, Ms. Sands. In 60 seconds, how would you bring back high-paying American jobs, and how would you address the supply chain shortages? 60 seconds.
Thank you. It is so important that we bring back those jobs. We saw under the Trump economy that we had record levels of employment for women, minorities, the least
I feel like she
educated.
grinds her teeth in her sleep.
And he was beginning
She's
to
like
bring
the kind
back
of
those
person that might do that.
jobs, lowering regulations, making us
What a weird insult.
competitive with the rest of the world with our tax structure. We have
You're
to hold the
stupid.
line
Oh, yeah?
and
Well, you look
support
like you
the
grind
low
your teeth in your
regulations.
sleep.
I will work to do that in Washington.
Yeah.
We're going to onshore those jobs. The supply chain in much
You
of
look
the
like you sleep on your
right now
side.
is in trouble because China is
I bet you
locking
sleep on your
down
tummy when you fall
50%
asleep.
high, and we have to make things here. So I say we
I'm
bring
gonna-
those
I'm
jobs
gonna-
back. We onshore
I'll pull
the
those
jobs.
out sometime.
We do it here in Pennsylvania. We can make steel here. We can make the pharmaceuticals. We can certainly explore for more energy. I called for Operation Warp Speed for Pennsylvania Energy, that we drill, we harvest, we lay the pipes, and we send it around our country, and we send some, we sell it to our allies and partners in Europe, so they don't need Russian energy.
All right, thank you, Ms. Sands. Mr.
Man, I don't like that talking point, because we would be doing it right now. Like, okay, so for anyone who cares, the reason we can't just give, we could be giving natural gas to Europe right now. Europe needs natural gas. Problem is, Europe, the only way you can ship natural gas overseas is by turning the natural gas into a liquid form. And then they don't have the refineries to turn it from a liquid form back to a gaseous form at Europe. So, even if we do what she's trying to do, even everyone actually is everyone on this stage is proposing that idea. It's not going to work. It's going to take billions of dollars and years of development in Europe for us to be able to do that with them.
Mr. McCormick, turning to you.
I long for the day that we can. That will be a good day.
How would you bring back American jobs?
Well, listen, first, just back to the last question. I'm not going to be out Pennsylvania or out America first by anybody on this stage. I've spent more of my life in Pennsylvania than you and Mehmet for sure.
Not
Jeff,
true.
not you.
That is literally every single time anybody is like, I'm not going to be out Pennsylvanian by anybody on this stage. It's like they always have to like send their condolences to the true Pennsylvanian over on the left. Like, they're like, I'm more Pennsylvanian than everybody here, all right? Except Jeff. That dude's a true fucking patriot. That guy's a real Pennsylvanian.
Fight America, America first. No one else can say that. And then I've created 600 jobs here in Pennsylvania in my company. None of you can say that. So I put my track record with Pennsylvania and America up against anyone here. Jeff's right. It's the energy sector is key to unlocking our economy. It's key to creating jobs here in Pennsylvania. And this is what we should be talking about as candidates on this stage. We have to unlock energy. And this is where Mehmet's got a real problem. Because in his own words, he said as recently as October 13th, 2014, that we should have a ban on fracking in Pennsylvania. His picture, his signature, his article. And
2014 is not recent. All right? That's almost 10 years ago. That's 8 years ago. Like, that's not recent.
These are the issues we need to cover. That's not an unfair thing to say. That's a reasonable question for you if you're going to represent Pennsylvania in the U.S. Senate, where fracking is the key to our energy future.
All right, turning to you, Mr. Oz, now your turn to respond on what needs to be done to bring back jobs and address supply chain issues.
Dishonest Dave is at it again. He went groveling to President Trump with, again, these types of allegations. President Trump saw right through him, did not endorse him, and then he endorsed me because, as he said in his announcement,
This starts right off the bat.
I know
Oh,
exactly
but
how to manage
remember,
the issues and
Trump
many
endorsed
of the other
me.
factors that we as a nation have to be strong
Oh,
and
jeez.
bold on. Let me speak to the specific answer. As a professor, a scientist, and someone who understands a little bit about the actual energy infrastructure, there is no way
You know
the
what?
Green New
I
Deal is going to
I
provide
think
us what the Democrats promised.
that if we're going to give the Democrats the best chance of winning, Dr. Oz might be the person to go against because the Republican constituency doesn't really like him right now. The issue that I see, though, is that Republican unity is a really big thing. And after, this is something that people don't really, pay attention to. But after the fighting is done, after the nominee is declared, the Republicans just flock behind him because he's not the Democrat. And, that's what's probably going to happen with Dr. Oz as well. And, because you can't, the only way that it wouldn't is if someone like John Fetterman or whoever's going to be running on the Democrat side is actively trying to reach out to the people of Pennsylvania specifically the conservatives of Pennsylvania and try to move them over.
It's a lie. It's a false narrative, like
is
so much
really
what
hard
you
to
said
do.
About COVID.
Really hard to do.
And so if you look at the architects of the Green New Deal, you'll realize that that's why they're shutting down our ability to harvest natural gas from under our feet here in Pennsylvania. Natural gas that could power the entire country for 200 years. They will provide well-paying jobs here in Pennsylvania. And I'll give you a stat. If we take our natural gas and ship it overseas to replace what they're
Elon Musk really bought Twitter for $45 million when I got that shit for free on the App
a solar
Store.
panel on every one of your roofs, plus doubling wind energy all together every year for 30 years.
All right.
That's progress.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Oz. Turning to you, Mr. McCormick, for a 30-second rebuttal.
Well, listen, the reason Mehmet keeps talking about President Trump's endorsement is because he can't run on his own positions and his own records. And what's true is that he has flip-flopped on every major issue we're talking about in this campaign. He's never, in his entire media career, advanced a conservative agenda. They're all liberal points, liberal agenda that he put forward, and now he's flip-flopping. And the problem, Doctor, is there's no miracle cure for flip-flopping, and Pennsylvanians are
I'll be right back.
through your phoniness, and that's what you're dealing with, and that's why you're not taking off in the polls.
All right, we got to stay with the economy for a quick follow-up. This is for everyone, so we get everyone weighing in here. Ms. Barnett, we're going to turn back to you. You have all blamed President Biden for inflation. What is one economic decision the Biden administration has made that you would vote to reverse? Ms. Barnett, you have 30 seconds to respond.
Yes, thank you so much. Listen, for the overwhelming majority of Americans, we've been out here doing the right things. We've been working, we've been paying our bills, we've been sending our kids off to school, we've been trying to put something to the side. And right now, and that has generally been the vehicle towards achieving the American dream. But right now, the American people, for those who are those Americans who are 90% below the top 10% of Americans versus the bottom 90% of Americans, they have been suffering through wage stagnation for the past 2 decades, and it is as a direct result of the Federal Reserve being weaponized to push all of these trillion-dollar bills.
Mr. Bardo, same question. What is one economic decision the Biden administration has made that you would vote to reverse?
Well, for your viewers who took my advice and played the drinking game about them talking about each other, they're already drunk. But on the American Rescue Plan was a disaster. Everywhere we go, and I'd say all of us, because we're all traveling around the state, everywhere we go, from Susquehanna County to Washington County, from Erie to Delaware County, we can't find employees. Employers cannot find employees. When people are not working, nothing works. People can't go to school. Everything breaks down. Our economy will not get back on track until people start working, and the Biden administration paid people to stay home.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Bartos. Turning to you, Ms. Sands, you have 30 seconds. One economic decision President Biden made that you would change.
Right. Well, it's the out-of-control spending. I'll stop it the day I arrive in Washington, because we're going to bring more America First senators than just myself. And we will stop the out-of-control spending, and it's going to bring down the inflation. The Green New Deal garbage, corruption that's stuffed into these multi-trillion-dollar bills are hurting our working families, our seniors on a fixed income. I will bring down the price at the pump for them. I will bring down that inflation and give them some relief. Carla Sands is going to bring down the price at the pump. I promise them.
All right, thank you. Mr. McCormick, same question. What is an economic decision that you would reverse? You have 30 seconds.
There's 3 things we could do to win back the war on inflation. The first thing we need to do is unlock our energy sector. That was a terrible decision. That's driving the price of fuel. That's driving inflation. The second thing we need to do is put pro-growth economic policies in place that ultimately grow our economy and deregulate. And the third thing we need to do is cut back dramatically on this spending. Republicans, Democrats alike over the decades have not been prudent on spending, but what's happened over the last 18 months under Joe Biden is unprecedented in American history. We got to pull back on the spending. Those are the drivers of inflation. As a job creator, I know what to do.
All right, thank you, Mr. McCormick. Mr. Oz, what is an economic decision the Biden administration has made that you would like to see changed? 30 seconds, sir.
The only thing Joe Biden is building back better is the Republican Party. And it's pretty clear to all of us right here, they were getting a tremendous boost from the inadequacies of his leadership. The number one thing I would do is reverse an executive order passed January 27th, right after he was inaugurated in 2021, which stopped drilling on federal lands. 1/3 of all the energy in this country is under those federal lands. Those lands are ours. We own those lands, all of us together. They should be lands that we can drill on. It'll provide us energy independence, actually energy dominance, make it easier for us to help our allies overseas.
All right, thank you. Dennis.
Well, the phrase America First has become a rallying cry for the Republican Party. All of you, to some degree, many tonight, have embraced it. And on the campaign trail, Mr. Bartos, we're going to begin with you. Do you consider yourself an America Firster? And in 60 seconds, can you tell us exactly what that means?
President Trump won Pennsylvania in 2016 because for the first time in generations, millions of our fellow Pennsylvanians felt listened to. They had felt ignored for generations, and someone was finally listening to them and fighting for them. And that means energy jobs. It means all of the main streets that I've had the privilege to travel around the last 5 years in all 67 counties, meeting working families, meeting farmers, meeting the people out there fighting in our healthcare systems to make sure we stay well, fighting to make sure our energy gets to market. They had someone in the White House fighting for them. And so President Trump's policies, remember, just 3 short years ago, we had the best economy in our lifetimes. All of our lifetimes. I'm looking around the room here. We're all young enough to say our lifetimes. Unemployment at the absolute low for every group that's measured. People were working, the economy was growing, and for the people who are at the bottom of the economic ladder, building their way up, their wages were increasing at the highest. So to me, America First means policies that put working families on a path to growing and climbing that ladder, parents being empowered to make the decisions right for themselves and their children, and safe and secure communities.
Thank you. We're going to turn to Ms. Sands. Same question. Define what America First means to you and how it would guide your work as a senator. You have 60 seconds.
Thank you so much. So everyone here on this debate stage is talking about being America First. They're all saying it. I actually did it. I'm the only person in this race that was appointed by President Trump to be his ambassador to Denmark, Greenland, and the Faroe Islands that actually worked in the administration, putting America First policies forward every single day. Also, Kathy, to my left, says she's America First, but she actually lost her last election by 20 points in a red wave year. And she says America First, but she can't actually close the deal. She lost by 20 points, and it was not stolen by 20 points. We need someone who can win this election. I'm a reliable conservative voice that will always vote conservative and America First in Washington. You can count on me. They did not steal that election by 20 points. She lost her last election to a weak Democrat. John Fetterman is not a weak Democrat. He's strong. I will beat John Fetterman in the fall.
Thank you. I am going to give you 30 seconds to respond, Ms.
Thank you so much for that. Because are you saying that there was absolutely that the 2020 election was above par, that there was no fraud, that there was no issues with that?
Not 20 points.
Are you telling me that it was perfect? And because apparently that's what she's saying. So for all of us in the Republican Party, now we have a candidate on stage, Carla Sand, who is saying that there was absolutely nothing to see in that 2020 election. But beyond that, you say that you are America First, and you did so much for President Trump, and yet he rejected you twice.
Thank you, Ms. Barnett.
And did not give you that
advice. Ms. Sands, I'm going to give you 15 seconds quickly to respond to that.
Yeah, I love how close together everybody is, because, like, that shit right there is my favorite. It's like, what do you have to say about this person? Well, like, it's so good. Man, I really want school to be over so I can decorate. Can't wait. Like, once my classes are done for this semester, I'm gonna go ham, and I'm gonna trick this place out.
President Trump doesn't always get the best advice. It's unfortunate but true.
Ooh, you know what? This is something too that is really fucking shitty to be like in a this is a really shitty situation to be in as a conservative. You can't say anything bad about Trump. You can't say anything bad about Trump. If he endorsed a person and you're debating against that person, you can't say, "Hey, Trump made a bad call." He did. He made a bad call. Picking this guy, he made a bad call. You can't even say that. he got bad advice. He was told bad information. That is like that has to be so hard to walk around. You're literally walking on eggshells every time you talk about Trump as a Republican. It's got to be
I am
terrible.
the only conservative voice.
No, you're not.
That
No,
every
you're not.
Pennsylvania voter can count on.
You can tell what's her name gets really mad at Carla Sands like throughout this whole debate because she just starts going like breaking the rules and is like, "No, you're not. That's not what I heard." Like she just claps back every fucking time. Oh my god, it's so funny.
Pennsylvania first.
Thank
I
you.
actually did it. Everyone else talks about it.
Thank you both very much. Speaking of America First, let's go back to you, Mr. McCormick. The original question in 60 seconds. How do you define America First?
Well, in a nutshell, I think what President Trump did is he put his finger on the fact that there were many millions of Americans and many millions of Pennsylvanians that were left behind, and that the policies and the leadership didn't take care of them. And I was reminded of this. This crystallized for me about a month into the campaign in Carbon County, and I walked into a diner, and a woman came up to me, and she told me that she wanted to tell me about her son, Michael. And Michael had volunteered for the military after 9/11, had gone to Afghanistan, had been in a terrible combat situation, and came home and was really struggling, and then sadly killed himself. And she said, when you get to Washington, I want you to watch out for Michael. Watch out for the Michaels of the world. And she handed me this gold star. And that's what this is about. That's what America First is about. It's about taking care of the Michaels across Pennsylvania who've been left behind by trade deals or by technology changes or by 20 years of war that hurt a part of our population disproportionately. They haven't been represented. They haven't been led. And that's what America First is to me.
Thank you. Turning to Mr.
That's literally like the best thing that McCormick says during this entire debate, and it's actually kind of moving. It's one good like, you know, soundbite.
Former President Trump endorsed you. He coined that phrase, America First, in 60 seconds. How do you define it exactly?
One word: respect. What President Trump did was respect people who had been othered, forgotten, canceled, people who were waiting in line for their turn, and they kept getting pushed out of the way by the federal government pretending to help. And the reality is when you respect.
So I just love thinking about that because of how backwards it all is. Like, by the end of Trump's term, were people getting kicked off for their beliefs? You know, it's like throughout all of his shit, everyone was getting away with anything they wanted. And then by the end of it is when people finally, like, is when corporations finally put their foot down and whatever. And it had a lot to do with January 6th. And it's really interesting because, like, it's the moves and the policies that Trump implemented in 2018 were the policies that were implemented against him and his constituency in 2020 when everyone was trying to, censor them or whatever. Just gotta, if you're worried about corporate overreach in social things like social media and things affecting your free speech, you can thank a homophobe from Colorado who didn't want to bake a cake for a gay couple.
People, they gravitate towards you. That's why President Trump has done so well. And by respecting people, specifically that manifests by educating their kids. And that includes, by the way, protecting them from indoctrination when they're 5, 6, 7 years of age. But it also means putting them through high school so they learn a trade. They're able to go out and actually make a living. And they're in a position where they can go out and become what conservatives need to do, which is to populate the country with people who think about conservative values as they make their lifelong decisions. Conservatism lives because we respect each other. We have to respect the working class population. They have been pushed to the side, and we can do better.
Okay, Ms. Barnett, we're going to turn to you. In 60 seconds, what does America First mean to you?
Yeah. You know, a few moments ago, Mehmet said that MAGA means respect. No, MAGA means freedom. And if you're a conservative Republican, you know that. Yes, President Trump coined the word MAGA, but the word itself, Make America Great Again, belongs to the people. What does it mean? It means the freedom to live my life the way I choose to live my life, and not to have anyone's foot placed on my throat, telling me what I can and cannot do, forcing me to take a jab.
I feel
when
bad
I may not
that
want to take a jab, forcing me.
I'm kind of curious, like, if this woman's hair like is naturally that straight, or if she's like had to do a lot of work to get it that way. I always wonder that for conservative black women, because there's just this like, there's still this push against natural hair, and natural hairstyles that like looking unprofessional. Like this, it's hard. You know, it's like I wonder. I'm just it's just a little cosmetic curiosity, but I'm wondering what her hair looks like. If this is her natural look, or if it looks a little different.
I don't want to do. That is what the word means. So although it was coined by President Trump, it certainly belongs to the people of this great nation, and we need to be very mindful of that. And I want the people who are watching, be very mindful and be very clear. It doesn't take much for someone to learn our talking points as conservative Republicans and then come back on stage and parrot them to us. Look at how people have lived their lives prior to the opportunity to actually run for this seat.
Thank you very much. We do have a follow-up for everyone, beginning with Mr.
She's got a good
Bartos.
point.
Former President Donald Trump continues to talk about the 2020 election. Is it time for the Republican Party to move forward? Mr. Bartos, 30 seconds.
Well, unfortunately, Joe Biden's the president. And as a result of his lack of leadership, we have chaos in Russia, the illegal war, the aggression against Ukraine. We have chaos in the Middle East. We have an ascend in Iran. We have an ascend in China. We have an economy in disarray. We have runaway inflation. And this is on the heels of every Democrat running. Every Democrat running this year is going to have to answer for lockdowns, shutdowns, lives ripped apart. So the 2020 election was a catalyst for what we're seeing now,
Berlin.
which is Americans are
What
going
are
to
you
stand
doing?
up with one loud voice, and Pennsylvania certainly will in November, and we are going to have historic wins in November.
Thank you. Ms. Sands, turning to you. You have 30 seconds. Is it time for the GOP to move on and pass the 2020 election?
Well, I'll just refer you and your viewers. First of all, Dinesh D'Souza's new movie just came out, or it's just dropping, and it's about the steal of 2020. Also, Senator Rand Paul said the election of 2020 was stolen by the Zuckbucks.
They couldn't sue over the election fraud, so they did the next best thing and made a movie that you have to pay for so that you can see the truth.
Zuckerberg and his family and his friends changing the outcome of the election by private money controlling our election. We have to ban it. I'll ban it in Washington. On day one, I'll work to do that for all of you. But also, Mehmet Oz says that he's always been a conservative. I will just share with you. I just tweeted out, my team, as we walked in.
You deserve to know the truth if you spend $15 on my movie.
His statements, and he is
All right.
not a conservative.
We need to move on. Mr.
now you're
McCormick,
speaking
moving
out
to you.
both
Should the
sides of your
GOP move on from the 2020 election? You have 30 seconds.
Well, when you take the oath to protect this country, the thing you're protecting is our right to vote. And we have a tragedy here that most Republican voters in Pennsylvania don't believe in the integrity of the election. And there's all sorts of reasons to worry about it, with the extension of the mail-in ballot and the lack of security of the ballot boxes, the lack of oversight of precincts, and then we do have the money that's come in from Zuckerberg, and we have the fact that the Hunter Biden laptop story was suppressed. So we've got to fix this. We've got to fix this at the same time. We've got to fix this.
It's so annoying when they say that, because it totally wasn't. They even found like deals and stuff like that on there. It's just like, it's just a nothing burger.
Now we got to have a governor that signs the right legislation, and the most important thing, voter ID. We got to have voter ID.
Thank you. We're going to move to Mr. Oz. Have you discussed the
Here's the new rule for 2022. If it is not a headline, if it is not breaking news, i.e., if I have to read the article, then it's being kept in the dark from me. if they aren't blasting it, if they aren't putting it on full blast, then they're keeping it in the dark from us. So what if they posted an article? So what if I can Google all of the information on this topic? They're keeping us in the dark right now.
Election with former President Trump, and do you think it's time for the party to move on? You have 30 seconds, sir.
I have discussed it with President Trump, and we cannot move on. As all the other candidates up here have outlined, under the cover of COVID, there were draconian changes made to our voting laws by Democratic leadership, and they have blocked appropriate reviews of some of those decisions. We have to be serious about what happened in 2020, and we won't be able to address that until we can really look under the hood.
Okay, Ms. Barnett, we're going to turn to you. 30 seconds. Is it time for the GOP to move past that 2020 election?
Absolutely not. There's nothing more important than making sure that my one vote matters. And we see that elections have consequences. And I thought it was very interesting that Carla Sands is going to delineate how the election was not above par and yet try to throw me under the bus for what I had no control over. We ran an amazing race in 2020. But yes, elections have consequences, and we must understand what happened, and we must hold people accountable. Not just understand, but we need to hold people accountable for what they did.
Thank you,
I'd
Lisa.
like to respond.
All right.
I'd like to respond.
15-second response,
Yes.
and then we're moving on.
So as I stated before, Kathy played the same card 2 years ago.
And what
She's
card
playing
was
now,
that? And what card
she
was
lost
that?
by 20
What card
points.
was that
And she has to
exactly?
take a hard
What
look in
card
the
was
mirror
that
because
exactly?
she did not.
So
They
you're
did
just
not
talking
steal
out
the
the
Ms.
side of your
election by
mouth.
20
Ms. Barnett,
points.
I'm going to ask that you refrain from speaking when Ms. Sands is speaking. 15 seconds for your rebuttal. We are then going to be moving on to another topic. We have to try to get in as many
But she
topics
called
as
my
possible.
name and she made a salacious comment
We
towards me,
will
so
get
I
a
will
chance.
be asking
You
for
will
a
get a
rebuttal.
chance to respond. Ms. Sands
Thank
first.
you.
15 seconds.
Yes, as I said before, the election of 2020 was not stolen by 20 points. Ms. Barnett lost to a weak
Oh, I love this part.
John
I love
Fetterman
this
is a
part.
strong Democrat. I will beat John Fetterman in the fall. I have the foreign policy experience, the defense policy experience.
Thank you, Ms. Sands.
And the trade policy experience.
And
I will
Donald
beat
Trump.
him.
And Donald
Ms.
Trump
Barnett, now I
is
want to
my
just take a
15
moment.
seconds.
I want to take a moment, though, to remind you of the rules. If you are talking over each other, no one at home can hear you. We are doing
It's a
this for the
Democrat
voters.
trick.
Just remember that we are doing this for the voters. If you are speaking over each other,
Just
no
had
one
to
can
say
hear
that
you.
real quick.
15-second rebuttal, Ms. Barnett. Then we are moving on to the next topic.
Yes. We ran an amazing race, and this is just talking out of both sides of your mouth. Do you have a crystal ball? How do you know how many votes were whether through legal fraud, whether through outright fraud, or whether through any other
Thank you,
issues?
Ms.
You don't
Barnett.
know
Turning
that. You're
on
just
to
talking
another
out the side of
topic,
your
we are
neck.
moving on to the pandemic and COVID. First question going to Ms. Sands. The pandemic has raged for 2 years and has impacted every segment of our society.
It's so great. It's like, oh, well, she lost her last election. She lost against a weak Democrat. Oh, but what you say that the 2020 election? It's such a great thing because like the 2020 fraud is a lingering talking point. It's so like she's like, oh well, she lost her last election, and she's like, you mean my election in 2020, one that was full of fraud, the one that we all agree on. Yeah. Right, guys. We all agreed that there was fraud, right? So there had to be fraud in my election too, right? Like, it's so like, remember, we all lied about this part. You don't want to be a liar, right?
Economy, as we all know.
It's so
Hopefully,
good.
God willing, we will never have to go through anything like that again. But if we do, what have we learned over the past 2 years that would specifically shape your policy priorities for the next pandemic? We begin with you, Ms. Sands, in 60 seconds.
Thank you. First of all, during the pandemic,
Hi,
I was
Kitty.
serving as the U.S. ambassador in Denmark, and my team and I watched what was happening in here at home. We were shocked at how Democrats who are left-leaning and mayors who are left-leaning treated their citizens, the lockdowns. They took their talking points, their efforts, from the Chinese Communist Party, who controls the World Health Organization. It's shocking how draconian these rules were and how much they hurt our seniors who were locked away, our businesses that were destroyed, and our children who lost education and lost their freedom. We know that the pandemic came from China, from Wuhan, and the Chinese Communist Party shut down the flights from Wuhan to the rest of China, but they encouraged the flights from Wuhan to the rest of the world, and the World Health Organization encouraged the same thing. It is controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. Citizens must say no, never again to mandates. We are free citizens.
Turning to you, Mr. McCormick, you have 60 seconds. What specifically have you learned over the last 2 years that would shape your policy priorities in the event we have another pandemic?
Well, I think what we've learned is that the government overreach by dictating everything from vaccines to testing to mass protocols has wrought huge damage on our population, on our children, on our businesses, and those decisions best rest with individuals and businesses to make the right decisions for them. And so what we've learned is we need to be careful about not letting the government take too much responsibility and control. And this is where Mehmet Oz cracks me up, because I hear all his statements about COVID now, And this is a guy who
just can't help but
on national
keep
television
attacking
said,
Oz.
The Chinese were doing a great job with COVID lockdown.
He did.
Who complimented Anthony Fauci as a great scientist and
He
a
did.
great leader, and who was the
He
who
did.
was the guy who was out there saying mask up, mask, show love. And so so we've had another flip flop in the case of COVID by Mehmet, but it's a serious problem because we can't have the government intervening and taking too much control. We've got to let that responsibility rest with individuals.
And we are turning to Mr.
Less
Oz. Same
bug
question.
phase.
What lessons have you learned over the past 2 years that would shape your policy priorities for the next pandemic? 60 seconds.
We witnessed a top-down, authoritarian, controlling response by government that was unable to accomplish any of its major goals. Early on, for the first 6 weeks, there was abject panic everywhere. We had no tests. We didn't have leaders that we knew we could trust. Thank goodness President Trump was able to put together Operation Warp Speed. But Anthony Fauci, who was the leader of that initial response, should be fired. I've called for his removal. I would debate him. I've offered every means of calling out his failings. But he's representative of what we're witnessing.
How fun would that be if Dr. Fauci and Dr. Oz had a debate over COVID policy? That would be crazy.
To my knowledge, were New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York in terms of its response to COVID, and they were three of the strictest states. So the mandates didn't work. We now know that, but we've made Washington drunk with power, with the belief that they can actually micro-rule everything. And you're seeing the manifestations of that with our school systems. You're seeing it with energy policy.
She writing down.
All these examples of a top-down, authoritarian, ineffective rule.
Mr. Oz, 30-second follow-up. Have you changed your position on COVID from the beginning of the pandemic to now?
No. I haven't done out just to be completely open with everybody. How could you possibly think that I was not aggressively pushing back when I remember distinctly speaking on the Sean Hannity show about the fact we should not keep our schools closed, and the amount of hate mail and posts that came out that effectively tried to cancel me was reflected in that single endeavor. It happened countless times as I pushed back against orthodoxy. The right thing initially was to be cautious. Doctors are careful when they walk into the operating room until you get your bearings. But once you understand who your teammates really are, who you can count on, and how the patient's doing, you need to be cautious. And then after that, do what's right for the patient, always.
All right, thank you, Mr. Oz. Turning to Ms. Barnett, 60 seconds. What have you learned over the last 2 years that would define your policy priorities?
We need to walk as free people. We need to remember that that COVID does not trump the U.S. Constitution. Those are some very key lessons that we should have learned coming out of this. We should have also learned what kind of leadership we really need at this moment. We lived through 2 years that felt like literal hell jumped out on top of us. With
This
Democrats
is so
putting their
fucking
foot on our toes,
ostrous,
putting their
all of
foot on
them.
our businesses, their foot on our economy, their foot on our children. We should have learned a very valuable lesson of what kind of leader we need at this moment. We need people who are going to be fighters. We don't need people who are globalists in the way that they have lived their lives and ran their business. And although I think you're a magnanimous individual, but you and your corporation, McCormick, you are a part of the WEF, the World Economic Forum, you, as well as you, Oz, they're both part of the World Economic Forum. This is a very serious organization that has a mindset of pushing globalism and ESG, environmental social governance.
Okay, thank you.
And we need to be mindful of that.
Thank you, Ms. Barnett. 15-second quick response, sir. Mr. McCormick.
Well, listen, I've run 2 businesses, wildly successful businesses. I'm not going to apologize for my success. I have done business around the world. It makes me uniquely capable of understanding the global world that we live in. I've served in the military. I've served in combat. So I know how to deal with the challenges we face.
All right.
And just like President Trump, that experience is going to make me a better senator.
But that didn't have anything to do with the World Economic Forum.
Thank you. Let's continue on with Mr. Bartos. Let him have a turn to speak here. What specifically have you learned over the past 2 years?
A critical question, because I want every viewer to hear this. During the pandemic, while we were shut down, while our schools were shut, while our businesses were shut, while our communities were ripped apart, Dave and his family were living, they were hunkered down, I think the magazine said, in Aspen, Colorado, which is lovely, but they were not in Pennsylvania. Dave was running a company where he instituted, as the CEO, mask mandates. Mehmet was living in New Jersey. I had my sleeves rolled up on main streets across all 67 counties, raising money with a great group. I was leading the effort, but we had lots of volunteers, raising money and helping over 1,000 small business owners on Main Street, mom and pops, keep the doors open when our government, and this is the key takeaway, our government continued to put career politicians and people who live at the highest levels of the elite, they continued to put policies in place that favored the giant companies over small mom and pops. And what I heard from the 600 plus business owners I had the privilege to talk to during the pandemic, They don't want a darn thing from the government except a level playing field. Who are we as a
That's
society?
so cool.
If all that's left when this dust
I don't
finally
know.
clears are giant corporations. That is not Pennsylvania.
It's so
and that is not
cool
the kind of sense.
when you hear like every single person except for this guy was like government overreach, government overreach, government overreach, government overreach, and this dude's like, he gave too much money to big corporate enterprises. Like they didn't give anything to our mom and pop shops. That's all that, like, all our little businesses wanted was to be able to have an equal playing ground with other corps. That's a good talking point. I think about like, it's like, dude, government overreach doesn't solve like solving the government overreach isn't going to solve the pandemic. That's like the problem I have with all of this. Like our government overreach was like a result of us trying to figure out what to do about the pandemic and also what to do about the resistance against all these people. Like we had to mandate a vaccine because people were refusing to take it. We wouldn't have had to mandate a vaccine if people didn't refuse to take it. Like if everyone just took it, we wouldn't have had to mandate it. And so like a lot of the things that happen that people are blaming overreach for, they're happening because these people were like, how do we get the numbers lower? And that is a question that nobody answered except for kind of this guy, except for Bartos, kind of. How do we get the numbers lower? It's like one of the things that I thought of that would be like a pretty, I don't know, this might be a decent solution is like, we should, like something that should have happened is people should have gotten a little more funding for their businesses should have got funding from the government to renovate their establishments to create more, what's the word? Like socially distant and like pandemic friendly facilities for their establishments. So like a pickup window instead of having you go into the whole instead of having you go into the whole thing and like, and a lot of people did this too, but instead of having you go into the whole restaurant and order your food and sit down there and stuff like that, you just have a pickup window. Order takeout and you grab it from the pickup window. Nobody goes into your store that way. More outdoor seating, which is something that people did, but like it wasn't facilitated very well. And I think if people have more funding, they could have converted some of the indoor sections of their restaurant into more outdoor spaces and things like that. Like I've seen bars that kind of do that where they like have like it's like the outdoor of the bar and you can like go in and then you can kind of go into a little more, but it's still outside. Yeah, like if we funded and facilitated more things and then was like, hey, here's guidelines that you need to make, but also here's money to do it, we would have seen a lot more effort be put into reducing numbers, I think, if we were actively funding and monitoring as well that whole situation. Because like what we did instead was we mandated things and then we gave relief, but the relief really only benefited larger companies and people who it got, don't get me wrong, it got the right people through the tough times, but a lot of people also abused that system. And like a lot of people were worried that like even the people who facilitated it, that they were giving funds like a little too liberally to people that might not have needed it, and they didn't create a lot of guidelines because they wanted to just get the relief out. So a lot of people who didn't necessarily need it got it. Like some of that stuff, I wish they would have talked more about, but that's boring, and you can't answer that in 60 seconds.
Mr. Bartos, Dennis.
Moving on to immigration and Title 42, which allows the federal government
There we go.
to prevent people from entering the country during health emergencies like a pandemic. It was set to expire May 23rd, but just tonight, before we took the stage, a federal judge granted a temporary restraining order to keep Title 42 in place until another court hearing. Javier Becerra, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Secretary, recently addressed his concern about extending Title 42. Listen to this, please.
You use migration laws to deal with migration challenge. You can't use the cover of health to try to deal with migration challenge.
That's true.
Mr. McCormick,
But at the same time, it already happened. Like, that's an issue that the Biden administration has had to deal with. They want to repeal this. But it was already put in place through the Trump administration, and like at this point, everybody who's arguing for it is saying, well, it was a COVID policy and COVID's not done, so you should finish COVID first.
we're going to begin with you. Do you agree with the judge who is
And, like,
keeping Title 42?
From a moral argument, I don't agree, but from a policy position, I do agree, because like it would be political dog water for you to just kind of like be like, oh well, we get to pick and choose what pandemic policies we want to implement.
In place and keeping migrants outside the country, or is that managing a migration issue with a public health order? You have 60 seconds.
I believe that it was a right decision to keep Title 42 in place, and it's a disaster on our border. I went to our border 6 weeks ago to see what the open border policies of Joe Biden have done. They have created a huge flow across our borders. It's creating and adding to the fentanyl crisis in Pennsylvania. It's contributing to the crime in our sanctuary cities like Philadelphia. It's putting huge burden on our social services. We've got to secure the border. We've got to finish the wall. We've got to end catch and release. And this is an area that our U.S. Senator has to fight on. And this is an area also where Mehmet's compromised. And he's compromised because he's an owner.
Hitting Dr. Oz
of a
again.
company that received hired 1,000 illegal immigrants and was fined in 2007.
He's focused on the numbers.
Agreed to.
He wants
the fact
to.
that they had
He doesn't
consciously
want
hired illegal immigrants.
more
And that $95 million
unsure
is the highest
conservatives. He
in the
wants Dr.
history.
Oz's.
He's a shareholder. His family gets $2 to $10 million a year from that company.
Mr. Oz, your turn. Do you support tonight's ruling, or are we managing a migration issue with a public health order? You have 60 seconds.
I support the ruling. We have a city, Philadelphia, which just lifted its mask mandate after putting it on 4 days ago. Universities all over the country are putting masks back on, locking down. My son was in medical school, similar situation, telling me firsthand how the kids don't want it, but they're forced. So if we're going to force our children, and now in Los Angeles, as you know, there's a mandate for all transportation, so people aren't even following the CDC rules. Why would we drop the obligation for immigrants who are coming into this country as part of a cartel-run human trafficking operation that's basically subsidized by the weak rules of the Biden administration? And they're running narcotics across at the same time. 100,000 Americans died last year from narcotic overdose. That's 4 times more than died of COVID under the age of 50. And when it comes to David McCormick and his progressively desperate efforts to undermine me, you're picking on my wife's grandfather's company, where I have no management role at all. However, you did have a management role while Bartos and I and many others were struggling to deal with COVID here, building the largest foreign hedge fund ever in China, which so much so that President Trump on his teletown hall on Friday said that there are some weak people, pro-China people, who would let China
Mr.
eat
Oz.
our lunch.
Thank you. Ms. Barnett, a federal judge not letting Title 42 expire on May 23rd. Is that appropriate, or should public health orders be controlling migration? You have 60 seconds.
It is appropriate. Yes, it is. You cannot have a state of national emergency for the nation, but not have a national emergency as it relates to COVID at the border. But that is, it's in line with a lot of other illogical things that the Biden administration and Democrats have forced upon American people. Right now, we are on track of having over 4 million unlawfully present people come into our nation. There is nothing racist. There is nothing dispassionate about wanting to know who's coming into our country, where are they going, how are they going to take care of themselves. That just makes plain sense. It's not just the fentanyl, but it's the human trafficking and the human suffering that is also coming into our country. We need to secure our border by a variety of measures. We need to enforce the Remain in Mexico, enforce the first safe nation. People should not be allowed to to shop for asylum. And lastly, we need to take a strong look at the USCIS. We have 1.5 million people trying to get into the country legally, and they're being barred of doing so.
Mr. Bartos, 60 seconds to you. The pandemic is keeping undocumented immigrants on the other side of the border. Is that an appropriate way to deal with the issue? You have 60 seconds.
The judge is correct, and even Democrats running for re-election are running away from the Biden administration on this issue. That tells you how bad the Biden administration is on Title 42 and on the border. The border is an unmitigated disaster. While these candidates fight with each other, I'm running to fight for Main Street, Pennsylvania.
Let's go,
The central
Bartos.
waters of Main Street, Pennsylvania are dying by the hundreds because of fentanyl that's crossing our southern border. We have a southern border that's porous.
It's like, here, let me try and get a couple.
Criminals are crossing the border. Even
Let's try and.
Not just the
Oh man,
fentanyl, but it's the human.
I want to. All right, I want you to look at everybody. Not to say that none of these people look like senators. In fact, she looks like. Obviously, she looks like the most like the modern political official we see today. But this dude feels like the pre-2012 senator. Like, this looks like the not the postmodern, but this dude looks like these guys are all the new contemporary, right? And then this dude is modern. Like, this dude is a little further back, but like I love the appeal, all right? Like, I love, like, he doesn't have hair implants like the rest of these. He doesn't have perfect hair like she does. He's got his little head, and he's got what he's going for him. And he's got his, Pennsylvania attitude and his Pennsylvania mindset. And that's what he's bringing to the stage, and that's what he's taking to the White House. Like, that's so cool. Or the Capitol.
Also coming into our country, we need to secure our border by a variety of measures. We need to enforce the Remain in Mexico, enforce.
Main Street, Pennsylvania are dying by the hundreds because of fentanyl that's crossing our southern border. We have a southern border that's porous.
By the hundreds.
Criminals are crossing the border, fentanyl's crossing the border, and Main Street Pennsylvanians across all 67 counties are suffering and dying.
I need to figure out this statistic because they keep throwing it out a lot, but like 100,000 people died of, it's either drug overdose or fentanyl overdose. And if it's fentanyl overdose, that makes more sense. Why that's a pretty big number, but 100,000 people in the entire U.S. dying of a drug overdose in a year sounds like a pretty low number.
We need a strong border. We need to build the wall. We need to enforce the policies that worked under the Trump administration, whether it's Remain in Mexico, Title 42, and other policies. And we need to fight for good-paying jobs, safe and secure communities, and parental choice, and for all empowering parents and students across all 67 counties. Saving Main Street, Pennsylvania means those three issues. It starts, in many cases, with a secure border.
Thank you. Turning to Ms. Sands, was the judge correct in extending Title 42? And what do you say to critics who insist that that's managing migration through a public health order? You have 60 seconds.
We need to secure our border and build the wall. Everything President Trump put in place worked. We had the most secure border in my lifetime during the last year of his presidency. In the Senate and in the House, we're going to put those policies back in place. We're going to need an America First president to really get it done in 2024. But the fact is, we do have the biggest influx of illegal immigration, and I will just call it an invasion into our country. We're estimating if we don't keep this in place, 20% of the people living in our country will be illegal by the end of the Biden administration. That's a disaster. They're giving them cash cards, housing, transportation.
I gotta do that math real quick. So, U.S. population, because we lost 1 million people, so I gotta figure out what the population is now. 329 million. Wow. Even after we lost 1 million people, we still went up. We've gone up by like 10 million since the last time I checked the statistic, and that had to be less than that had to be 5 to 10 years ago. 20% of 330 million. That's 66,000 people.
Phones and
Could
benefits
you-
that American citizens don't get. We
Like-
have to secure our border. We have.
Okay. 66,000. This is the fallacy of big numbers, all right? Because we already have more than we have about 11 million or illegal aliens in the country right now. That's already more than 20%, but we don't care. And this was before this year. So, that's like a 2019 statistic. So the number's higher. You don't care. But 20% sounds like a big number to you. 20% of 320 million, 65,000. In this year alone, I just don't buy it.
Have to build the wall. And I will just say.
And also, even so what? That's like this is like all dispersed through like populations in different states. The most significance this has is that you have a small town like O'Hare, Nebraska, that has like less than 10,000 people, and like over 60% are immigrants. It's a small town, and like over 60% are from Mexico, either legally or illegally. That's what happens. That's it. Like, nobody's coming over to bring on the regime change.
He actually praised the Chinese Communist Party's response to the pandemic, and Dave McCormick could never have made the billions he did without bowing to the Chinese Communist Party. You do not make billions in China without bowing to the Chinese communists.
Thank you. We have a quick follow-up. Ukrainian refugees are crossing into the U.S. along the southern border. Forbes magazine estimates that more than 3,000 Ukrainian citizens were processed in March. That's a 12-fold increase from February. Should we treat Ukrainian refugees differently than other undocumented immigrants? Mr. McCormick, 30 seconds.
We should treat Ukrainian refugees differently, but we should take care that not to expand that envelope into a broader program. And the most important thing is we need to support the Ukrainians in their fight for freedom. We need to give them all the lethal aid they need. We need to tighten up the sanctions. This has been a calamity, and it's because of the weakness of Joe Biden in Afghanistan and our energy policy.
Mr. Oz, we're going to give you 30 seconds. Should Ukrainian refugees be treated differently than other undocumented immigrants?
No, Ukrainian refugees should be coming directly to America, not through the southern border where it's a lawless environment that is profiting for cartels. Again, we have to drain the swamp, not just in Washington, but at the border. People are making a lot of money off of the weak response of the Joe Biden administration. And Ukrainian refugees may be Ukrainian, maybe not. Who knows who they are? And we should be directly allowing them to come. And there are communities here in Pennsylvania where there are large Ukrainian populations who are inviting these people in, and the U.S. government is not getting out of their way. They're not in any way helping these poor folks to immigrate here legally.
Thank you. Our time is drawing near. We want to move on to another topic. Lisa.
We want to quickly get to another topic. Only 30 seconds for these responses, though. Beginning with you, Mr. Oz. A question has to do with transgender athletes competing in women's sports. Earlier this year, UPenn swimmer Leah Thomas won the 500 freestyle swim at the NCAA Women's Championships. Before transitioning, Leah competed with the UPenn men's team in 2019. There was outrage coming out of the victory of Leah Thomas by female swimmers who thought it was unfair. Would you vote in favor of legislation that would prevent trans women from competing in women's sports? Mr. Oz, 30 seconds.
Yes. Biologic men, don't let liberals control the language. Biologic men should not be playing women's sports. I feel so strongly about that, I actually put it in my ad. And I believe across the board, we're missing the point here. Leah Thomas went to my alma mater, Penn. Penn said nothing to protect those poor young women who got up at 6 in the morning, practiced their whole lives to protect their rights. The NCAA cowardly said nothing. It was the parents of these poor girls who love their daughters more than anything in the world who stood up and said, enough's enough, you're hurting our children. What happened to Title IX support of female athletes?
Thank you, Ms. Barnett. 30 seconds. Would you vote in favor of legislation that would ban trans women from competing in women's sports? 30 seconds.
Absolutely. Biology matters. Biology is a reality. And I mean, it is, I find it to be unjust. I find it to be misogynist. You cannot compete and get all the benefits of being a man all your life and then suddenly decide one day you want to be a woman. I find it to be incredibly unjust. Not only do we need to have laws that protect those who find themselves outside of the norm of what society may consider the norm, but we also must look at legislation that protects our young boys and girls as well.
Same question. Would you vote in favor of legislation that would prevent trans women from competing?
The failure, what we're seeing happen at Penn is, again, another example of the failure we see of woke CEOs, woke corporations, woke institutions. The NCAA failed those swimmers, period. The NCAA failed. The highly paid executives at the NCAA failed. We have fought for 6 decades to get our girls onto a level playing field for athletics, and we want to undo it all because there's no courage from these leaders. I would support legislation to ban it, but we can't keep looking to the government for that. This falls on the people who are highly paid to have the courage to take care of it.
Your comments in favor of legislation that would prevent trans women from competing?
Yes, in a word. I actually wrote an op-ed opposing transgender athletes Men cannot compete against women. It's not a level playing field. But I'm going to talk to the moms and grandmas for a second. I will protect your children's innocence in school. I will ban the indoctrination of children into critical race theory, where they teach our children to hate each other and hate their country. I will work
thank you, Ms.
at the federal level.
30 seconds.
Absolutely, I would support that legislation. Biological males should not be able to compete with females. But again, Mehmet,
Remember, kids, apologize to your black friends today.
sorry to keep bringing these things up, but you did an
Let them know how bad you feel for being white.
entire show on July 22nd, 2015, that was about 8, 7, 8, 9-year-old children. And
Welcome. Remember to tell little Tyrone over here that slavery was your fault.
you were supporting those
God, dude.
conversations about transgender transitions, surgical things, treatments that would be irreversible. So I think we could all agree that that's absolutely
Time is up.
inappropriate in every way.
I wish we could
No,
continue
I'm sorry.
on. We've got
I'm sorry, that's a
10
little too much.
10
Yeah,
seconds
of
to
course.
respond.
So
and we
David
gotta get
McCormick is
closings.
going to be my biographer.
No, I
He
tweeted
studied
it
my
out.
residency about views that need to be expressed on network
All right,
television.
we have got to move on. Our producers are telling us got to get those closing statements in. Our debate is coming to an end. We're going to go in reverse polling order, beginning with Ms. Sands. 30 seconds.
Thank you. I'm running for the U.S. Senate here in Pennsylvania. I'm America First. I'm a pro-life, pro-First Amendment, pro-Second Amendment, constitutional conservative, America First businesswoman, Christian, and mom. I will never back down in fighting to make Pennsylvania a better place for our families. We've been going in the wrong direction for over 40 years. This is the time for a turnaround. I'm asking for you to support me on May 17th.
Mr. Bartos, 30 seconds.
I'm a kid from Reading who spent his entire life here in the Commonwealth. I love Pennsylvania with every fiber of my being. And as you watched here tonight, you got out-of-state candidates fighting with each other. To all the viewers at home, no, I will always fight for you and your families. I always have. I always will. I'd be honored to have your support on May 17th. So much.
And Ms. Barnett, 30 seconds.
Yes, I am you. I'm you. I have been traveling over 1,500 miles all across this Commonwealth, more than any other candidate here. When someone mentions a county, I see your faces, I hear your stories. I'm sitting across the table with you. I've been in million-dollar homes. I've been in some very humble homes. But these are very serious times. Our country is in trouble, and we need people who not only memorize our talking points, but people who have actually lived our talking points and who will fight for you and your
Ross,
family.
30 seconds. Mr. Ross.
About life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Life starts at conception. Protect those little children from indoctrination when they're young. Make sure they're well educated and turn out into the workforce to build successful lives. Keep them safe from crime and protect the borders. Liberty is about the First Amendment and the Second Amendment to protect the First Amendment. And the pursuit of happiness for me is about capitalism, which is a beautiful way of living your life, and individualism. We don't want to be collectivists. That's what the Democrats are pushing for. As Republicans, we have to be exactly who we are, be free to do that, and be brave enough to act on it.
Mr. McCormick, 30 seconds.
Stakes are high, ladies and gentlemen. The country is headed in absolutely the wrong direction. I'm battle tested. I've served in our military. I've put America first. I've gone into combat. I've built businesses. I built businesses and created jobs in Pennsylvania. I'm an outsider, and I'll go fight for you because I am you. I grew up in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania, on that main street Jeff Bartos is talking about. And the thing you can count on with me is I say what I believe, and I will do what I say. And I'd be honored to have your vote and privileged to be your senator. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all. We would like to thank all of our candidates for participating in tonight's debate. And a reminder, Pennsylvania's primary election is May 17th.
And be sure to tune in on Wednesday night at 8 p.m. as the Republican gubernatorial candidates will debate. We thank you for joining us. We thank all the candidates, and have a great night.
We'll keep them in mind, and I'll keep you posted on the Dr. Oz progress. And we'll see what the aftermath of this all becomes. That's gonna be it for me today. I gotta get to class.